Minor technical problem. Okay, welcome to Risk and Coverage and Design Assist and Delegated Design. I'm Frank Musica. I'm part of the Schneider Education and Management Assistance Program here. I've been with Schneider for almost 30 years now. With me is Kathleen Curry, who I think has been here about as long as I have and who's had a number of roles in the Schneider organization, and I'll let her introduce herself and explain what she does right now.
Hi, everyone. This is Kathy Curry, and as Frank said, I've been with Schneider for about 30 years now. All of that experience is in underwriting in construction programs. Currently, I am the program manager and lead underwriter for contractors, professional liability, and pollution incident liability coverage products. I'm very happy to be with you today.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. When we talk about design delegation and design assist programs, they're not just elements of how the industry works. They are situations that really raise questions about responsibility, insurability, and legality. Designers and contractors are held to different legal standards. Designers are usually held to a professional standard of care. That's generally defined as the ordinary and reasonable care usually exercised by one in the profession, that same profession, on the same type of project at the same time and in the same place, under the same circumstances and conditions. In practice, that means that licensed design professionals can, without liability, engage in non-negligent errors. Their work can fail to achieve the desired result, but if they're not negligent, they're not liable for that failure. Of course, if their negligence cause damages to the client or to anyone else, they can be liable. And that's what professional liability insurance is all about. It really covers the tort law liability of design professionals. Contractors, by contract, absent unusual circumstances, are required to substantially perform their contractual obligations. That's a different kind of standard. They often are subject to tort liability as well, but under contract liability, if a contractor fails to build according to the plans and specifications, it is liable pursuant to the terms of the contract. The contractor cannot fail to perform and escape liability because it met some accepted standard of care. It's a contractual obligation. When we talk about design delegation and, in a way, design assist programs, they really blend those roles. It's a blurring of the line between design and construction. Typically, a prime contractor agrees to procure a design that meets the performance criteria, and it throws down its responsibility to a specialty contractor and the specialty contractor's designer. Unless specifically provided otherwise, the prime contractor may not get the benefit of having only to perform to a professional standard of care with respect to the design services component of what they're contracted to do. Increasingly, however, as design delegation occurs, design contractors have the same type of liability that design professionals have. They have tort law liability, either direct or vicarious, for harm that their designs could cause. And that's one thing we'll be talking about today, and one thing that Kathleen will be talking about in coverage. Okay, design delegation or design assist. Design delegation means that the design professional really assigns design responsibility to the contractor. It's an assignment of responsibility under a certain performance criteria, and it's usually for the design of a discrete portion of construction project. Typically, either a construction manager or a general contractor, which usually is not a licensed design professional or does not have licensed design professionals on staff, delegates that to a specialty contractor, and that specialty contractor will typically employ licensed specialty designers who will generate and be responsible for the design of the delegated portion of the project. And the intent of that is to comply with and achieve the performance criteria specified by the contractor. Now, we'll talk about that not being anything really new. In fact, in the Schneider program with CNA, we started about in 1978 to insure contractors, because at that time, the contractors were clearly responsible for shop drawings. And shop drawings are really an early form of delegated or assigned design responsibility. Unlike true delegated design, the preparation of shop drawings was for communications of the contractor's proposed way of carrying out the contract requirements. And shop drawings have never been part of the actual contract. They're not a contract document. That whole package of agreements and general conditions and all that the contractor has to meet. Contract documents do not include shop drawings because they are communication tools, but there was still some concern on the part of contractors back in the 70s that perhaps they were getting into an area where they weren't insured, and we started offering them insurance coverage. Now, design assist is a different kind of idea, and that's really the idea of early contractor involvement, engaging members of the construction team in the design process, and that is supposed to benefit everyone. It certainly benefits the contractor or specialty subcontractor because they're involved early. They get to have influence over what the design is going to be, and often the design then represents the best way that they're able to carry out something. So where delegated design is really just a flow down of responsibility, design assist is really a different kind of procurement method. It's supposed to assist the architect, the engineer, and others in the whole process. And I think that makes sense. In fact, it makes sense to the point that in our credits that we provide for design firms, constructability reviews, which are often part of the design assist process, help design firms get credit on their deductible obligation or even on their premium. Now, okay, what is delegated design? Well, again, it's been around for years. If you look back to 150 or more years ago, about the time that both the American Society of Civil Engineers and the American Institute of Architects got founded, the idea was that contractors did one thing, designers did another, but there was a lot of overlap. But as licensing laws came in, there started to be a real separation between the trades and the design profession. And the pendulum now seems to be blurring these lines that were set up many decades ago. And for reasons of cost in projects and complexity or specialization, or even the use of BIM, there seems to be more situations where designers are delegating responsibility for achieving the performance requirements to the general contractors, or through the general contractors to specialty contractors. In fact, a survey recently said that there's probably 100 scopes in the design process that have been delegated or could be delegated to contractors and especially subcontractors. And that's often structural steel connection details, curtain wall panels, metal framing systems, roof trusses, stairs, handrails, guardrails, a number of things like that, fire suppression systems. And in fact, I think there's very few engineers anymore who design sprinkler systems. That's usually a delegated design situation. Often I think there's a lot of confusion in the terminology because it's used so loosely, and it leads to confusion and kind of unclear divisions of the roles and responsibilities. either delegated design or design assist that we'll be talking about, or things like design completion or early contractor involvement. They don't seem to have a standard definition or uniform application. I mentioned that with shop drawings, the responsibility for elements of design, design of construction means, methods, techniques, sequences, procedures went back many, many years, and we started ensuring them in 1978. It really became more formalized as design delegation in the 1997 edition of the AIA document. As Schinner is part of the AIA contract documents program, we provide insurance advice to the group. And back in 1997, in kind of an agreement with the general contractors, the AIA really formalized what was kind of a mini design build responsibility. And that was the specifications of performance criteria, and then assigning to the contractor to design the details to satisfy the criteria and produce the results. It really recognized what was going on before in a more formal way. And one thing it did in 1997 is it changed the standard AIA contract that says that the contractor no longer had to construct the project to produce the intended result of the architect, because that was so subjective. And as part of this mini design build, it really said that the contractor now had to produce the result indicated in the contract document. So because the contract documents did not indicate absolutely everything the contractor had to build, that opened the door for performance standards and the delegation of design. And, even without that, design delegation appears in contracts. General contractors often have to review plans and specifications and report errors and defects. Part of that is to get them to understand what's required of them early on. They have to prepare the shop drawings, and they have to, not only coordinate the preparation of them by specialty subcontractors, but they have to review them, and they have to acknowledge that they reviewed them as they pass them on to the architect or the engineer to approve. And the designer's approval, both under AIA contracts and engineers joint contract documents, committee contracts, is really only for conformance with the design concept. The shop drawing idea does not change the contract in any way. Contractors and the flow down to specialty subcontractors always have to meet the requirements of the contract document. There's other obligations on the GC or construction manager at risk, and often that's design review or constructability analysis, and that again depends on the contract. And there's situations where there's changes in the field, and the contractor is really directed to provide an engineered solution to whatever the problem is. So they have this kind of design delegation, even if it's not a clear performance spec that they have to meet. But it is performance specifications that really creates this both opportunity for the contractors and responsibility for the contractors. Most contracts contain both design and performance specifications. Contractors can rely on design specifications, they're prescriptive, because they contain an implied warranty that if they are followed, the construction will be acceptable because they follow the plans and specifications. That's not a new concept. That goes back to 1918. We'll refer to it later. It's called the Spearman Doctrine. And it was a case in which a contractor was working for the Department of the Navy, and the Navy insisted that the contractor do everything possible to produce the final results. And the situation had a number of hidden defects in the site. And the contractor said all his responsibility would have been was to meet the requirement of the contract document, to build what he was told to build, and not to foresee other problems and not to respond to other problems. The Supreme Court agreed with that and basically said when an owner gives a contractor plans and specifications, the owner provides an implied warranty that if they are followed, an acceptable result will be produced. That's an implied warranty on the owner's part. There is not an implied warranty on the designer's part. Designers only have to be non-negligent in what they provide to the owner. So owners are put into this situation where they have to give the contractor a warranty that the designer does not give them. Performance specifications do not do the same thing. They do not rise to an implied warranty because they require the contractor specifically to use its own expertise or the expertise of its especially subcontractors. So that really switches the responsibility to a great extent. And the contractor essentially assumes the role of the designer with respect to part of that element. So normally in a design professional makes recommendations to the owner on what the design should be. The owner accepts those recommendations and puts the contract out to bid or negotiates the fee for the construction of it. And in doing that, provides an implied warranty to the contractor. With performance specifications, because now the party designing it as part of the construction process has to meet the performance criteria, that really takes away the implied warranty, the spare protection, and puts the contractor at risk. And that's why contractors are worried about providing more and more design services. Many of them also, of course, see that there's an opportunity for them as well. And I think we've seen since 2008 in the Great Recession that many contractors are saying not only that all I want to do is build according to what you tell me to build, many of them are looking at I can provide more services to you, including the design of discrete elements of this project, and I'm willing to take that risk, and I'm willing to buy insurance to cover that risk. Now, when I was talking about the difference between design specifications and performance specifications, this is how one court approached it. We said design specifications really tell the contractor not only what to do, but what the contractor must do. And the contractor has to meet those requirements, has to meet what's in the contract documents, and is not privileged to deviate from that in any way. The contractor, of course, it can meet those requirements according to how it works with its own means and methods and techniques and procedures and sequences, but it can't deviate from what's required by the contract document. The performance specifications really give a different kind of standard. And that means the contractor has to not only look at its own means, methods, techniques, sequences, and procedures, but it assumes a special responsibility for meeting the requirements of the performance standards. Now, in some states, that has been a slow process, in that there are some states that still say even if you delegate design to a contractor, and that contractor flows that down to a specialty contractor who might either design it in-house through its own licensed design professionals or contract out to a licensed design professional for the design, that the responsibility should still stay with the original design professional. Because when that original design professional signs and seals its documents, it's telling the owner and it's telling the rest of the world that it takes responsibility for that entire project. So some states have been slow to come around to the idea that a prime design professional can slow down design responsibilities through performance specifications to lower tier designers and have the lower tier designers be the only ones responsible for that. So if you're looking at design delegation in your own state, you really have to look at what the state law requires. There are problems for contractors through delegated design, and we'll talk about the liability exposure. They not only have the cost of repair and replacement of faulty systems or work, but they could be liable for the design as well. So they have both the design liability or professional liability, as well as the contractual liability for the defect in the faulty system or workmanship. And as I mentioned, the Sperrin doctrine really doesn't apply. You will see this in many contracts where they try somehow to preserve their right to rely on information provided by others. But for the most part, the Sperrin doctrine that both defends them against the claim of defective work, I only relied on the design of others, and really helps them in an affirmative way. They can claim delays, extra charges, other things, additional contract time, additional contract money, because they relied on the design produced by others, which produced an unacceptable result. Now, I have to say that we talked about some states, and states vary. Design delegation sometimes is prohibited unless those services are specifically required by the contract documents, or the contractor must really do the design to fulfill the responsibility for its own construction means and methods. And again, the states are very careful about if the contractor has to produce a design solution, the design professional in charge must specify all the performance or design criteria that must be satisfied, and has some level of review and approval of the contractor submittal for conformance with at least the design concept for the project. That leaves the contractor and what the contractor should do for protection. Well, contractors, I think, who accept this risk recognize that they will incur some responsibilities and risks for the design services. And they look very closely at, what the contractual responsibilities and relationships are, what the real lines of responsibility are. They review documents very carefully for any delegated design elements that might not be clearly spelled out. They realize what their level of coordination is, if it's a subcontractor's responsibility for this design delegation. And they look not only at their own insurance coverage, but they look at the insurance coverage for their specialty contractors. And that's a big part of how they protect themselves. They recognize that they have to employ competent design professionals, that they have to be licensed in the state in order to discharge their design responsibilities. Now, in some cases, they may have those people in-house, and more contractors are doing so, or they may be hiring someone else to do it. But they also are very careful now about ensuring liability for their design services, or if they contract with design professionals who are providing the service through them, that they carry adequate professional liability insurance. And as we talk a little bit more about the contractor's liability, Kathleen will be talking about how they cover that with insurance. Now, this is a language in the AIA contract, and it talks about two things that the contractor will do. for design delegation, if those services are specifically required by the contract documents for a portion of the work, that's design delegation. Or if the contractor needs to provide services to carry out its responsibilities for construction means, methods, techniques, sequences, and procedures, that's not delegated design, but that is the responsibility of the contractor. The AIA is very careful to say we're not forcing contractors to provide professional services in violation of applicable law. That would make the contract void. So they're very careful in spelling out those two responsibilities, either assigned by contract or needed to be done because of the contractor's responsibility for controlling its own means, methods, techniques, sequences, and procedures. Contractors either accept a risk knowingly and price them accordingly, or they try to employ contract language that really bifurcates the standards to which a contractor is going to be held. So they may submit a contract modification that says that they will only be liable under a professional standard of care for the professional services the contractor is agreeing to procure or provide, either, again, directly or vicariously, and then a contract standard for the actual construction work, the traditional construction work. But I think most contractors are very deliberate in how they consider how the risks are going to be transferred and the various insurances on the project that they're going to be procured and how they're going to operate. This is the design delegation part, and it basically states that if design is being delegated, the contractor has to have those services provided by a licensed, properly credentialed licensed provider, and that licensed provider will provide whatever certification is necessary and will sign and seal the documents. It does not require in the A201 for the original design professional to check the results against the performance criteria. That certification by the other design professional is supposed to be that the other design professional has met the performance criteria. Now, you may know that the Associated General Contractors of America, in a coalition with about 40 other construction groups, has its own set of documents, and they're called the Consensus Docs. And the Consensus Docs 200 is both the agreement and general conditions between the owner and the constructor. And it, too, recognizes that design delegation is possible. And it's not much different from what the AIA says. Initially, when the Consensus Docs program started looking at design delegation, they try to write into it a number of disclaimers, and they try to write into it a number of situations where the Stern Doctrine will be preserved and that they would be able to rely on the responsibility of others. They do say that whatever that licensed design professional who required by law is performing the design services really takes the risk, but that doesn't prevent the contractor from having vicarious liability for the design produced by its subcontracted design professional or a design professional through a subcontractor to the general contractor. Now, that's different from design assist, and we'll go into design assist in a little bit of detail. The idea of design assist is really early contractor involvement. And again, it's been something that's been going on for years, but I think is becoming more and more formalized. In fact, at one of the early design assist documents was when the American Institute of Architects tried to develop its own integrated project documents. And in one of the first ones, there were separate contracts between the architect and the owner, and a contractor and an owner, but they were entered into about the same time. So that was early contractor involvement. The contractor would be on board, usually on a negotiated basis, early on. And the contractor and the design team would share a set of general conditions with the idea that there would be constant interaction between the two. And that is really good on complex projects because it really helps to produce a successful project delivery. Often that not only involves the prime contractor, but they get the key subcontractors in and they provide their early support. And it may be, the HVAC system or, some other part of the project. As projects get more complicated in laboratories and healthcare facilities, this is becoming more typical. So if it's not an integrated project delivery approach, it's at least a design assist approach. Now, what does it do? Well, it adds a lot of value to the project. In a traditional design to build project, the design team works independently to design various systems, looked at preliminary cost estimates, prepared as design milestones. The project owner may consult with a CM for pre-construction services to provide all cost sequencing, constructability information. But then after the design is complete, the construction documents are published and turned over to subcontractors for bidding. The subcontractors are awarded and the process of coordination and shop drawings and procurement really begins. And then discrepancies may arise and the design team is required to answer questions or provide responses to RFIs. And that often results in project delays and change orders and added costs to the project. So the design to build system is seen by owners as having too many adversarial relationships. And it doesn't really fully capitalize on the strengths of all the parties to really work together to come up with a project that can be done more quickly without the kind of redesign or RFIs or change orders that often plague many projects. So the really design assist project changes the dynamic of a normal design bid build project. And the building team really determines how each party can best contribute at each stage and when transitions should occur to maximize the efficiency of the design process directly leading to construction. In design assist, usually the subcontractors, general contractors, subcontractors attempt not to assume design liability because they're only providing advice. They assist the architect and engineers of record with input as the design develops. They understand the project goals and priorities, and they assume some degree of ownership of the design. But their attempt to avoid liability for their design input often is not clear. Courts will often say, if you were involved in the design of this, if you contributed to the decision-making process, you are taking on design liability. And that's why we'll talk about what insurance is available to subcontractors as well as contractors on design liability. And, in design assist, there is some challenges. I mean, part of it is that if you're bringing on the construction team early on, are you missing some price advantage? Are you basically paying more for the construction services because you're getting them involved earlier in the process? Again, are they taking design liability for the kind of assistance they're providing during the design stage? It also adds some time and some cost to the design stage because, again, you not only have a design team working on this, but you have other parties and other meetings and other reviews going on. And some design professionals, some design firms will ensure do not like the idea of giving up that decision making. Again, they make recommendations to the client and the client accepts them. If the contractor or especially subcontractors get involved and provide assistance during the design phase, a lot of design firms feel that they're being challenged. And in fact, that may be true because I think we'll be seeing as more and more states rethink design professional licensing laws, that more and more contractors and especially subcontractors will try to take over more and more of the design process. There's also problems if you're getting a contractor or CM at risk involved during the design stage of how do you administer a subcontract, because often those are bought out later in the process, and bringing them on early makes a difference. And of course, this cannot happen on all kinds of projects because in many public projects there's procurement limitations, or there could be limitations because of other laws or controlled by financial institutions as well. The consensus documents did publish, I think, the very first design assist document. It's called the Design Assist Addendum, CD 541. It was just published this year. And it provides some real guidance to the design assist process on how the owner's program is going to be evaluated, on how you look at constructability of a project, on whether you do cost estimating at fixed points during the design process, or if the parties doing design assist are in there continuously updating the cost estimate. It's often seen as value engineering up front. And you know, any of you who have seen value analysis or value engineering during the construction process, it usually takes away something. It often is considered a race to the bottom. How can we make this project cheaper? How can we maybe meet the requirements, but do it in the way that costs the least amount? And that usually ends up having an effect on the project. Having a design assist solution means that you're really looking at value all the way through. You're getting the people who are specialized in the process helping out early on. And it may be that they're looking at this project as how is the best way my firm can build it. So it may, in fact, influence the engineering in a way that the design team may not otherwise want. Or it could be a design assist up front that indicates how the most economical way of doing something is in the industry as a whole. The CD 541 still talks about scheduling requirements and manpower analysis. Because it's run by contractors, they still refer to it as manpower instead of staffing. But they do address many of the issues. If you're looking at design assist and design assist subcontract, you know, the real question is, what part of the construction team is going to be engaged during the design phase? Is it especially subcontractors? What trades are going to be involved? How are the design criteria standards going to be set so that they're not basically hacking away at the project and changing the design criteria as they go? Who's really coordinating the design? Because once you do design assist, you're having a lot more players up front in the process. And often what happens with design assist is it flows into the kind of design delegation where there really are design build trade packages that are put out. So you're really delegating the design and along with the construction. And you have to look early on at how that's going to be done. There are certainly some benefits. Design efficiency is one of them. This is especially important on things like sustainable design projects, because many of the failings on sustainable design projects come during the construction phase. So if you get design assist early on, you're more likely to have a sustainable project that actually meets the design criteria. It also helps to look at life cycle costing. The accuracy in pricing can be far greater than what you might get with a regular cost estimator. Some owners are doing this because they realize that it can be a faster speed to market. It may take a little bit longer during the design stage, but the construction process will go much more quickly. And you don't have the stop and start of having design documents go out there, and then bids coming in, and then the selection process, and then the construction. And, when you're looking at some of the risks on the project side, part of it is the constructability risk, and getting especially subcontractors, especially in early on, or the general contractor, you really do a risk analysis as part of the design, and you're really designing it for the production planning. How is this actually going to be built? And there's some real benefits on that. Now, with that, what we're going to do is talk about what insurance is available to cover both design delegation and design assist. And the parties that are involved, the contractors, and especially contractors, which we call artisan contractors. So, Kathy, can you talk a little bit about what these policies really are?
Sure. So from an insurance perspective, there are two insurance products that are offered by CNA Schinnerer for contractors that support delegated design and design assist. As you can see, there's a product called Contractors Professional Liability coverage, and that is for general contractors, design build contractors, and construction managers. The second product is the Artisan Contractor Errors and Omissions Policy, and that is for, we call it artisan specialty trade contractors, that provides coverage for design services and also a few other coverages that I'll chat about briefly. But typically under the Artisan Contractor product, we're going to look to cover electrical contractors, mechanical, sprinkler contractors, telecommunications. There are probably about 30 different classes of specialty contractor that will fit under that Artisan product. I will say, in support of what Frank has talked about, I am getting more and more requests for coverage for both of these products from various sources, and they are primarily driven by contract requirements. Owners are more and more aware, I think, that these products are available and that there's a need in the changing environment for these products, and so we get quite a bit of interest, at least in starting the process of getting a quote. So for the general contractors, the product really is linked to coverage for a wrongful act and arising out of professional services. And as you can see, we talk about what defines a wrongful act, and this is language from the insuring agreement, and professional services. So this actual definition within the policy very much mirrors the architects and engineers' professional liability policies that we write and are provided by other carriers as well. Professional services are defined in the policy as those provided by an architect, engineer, landscape architect, etc. So if you are a GC providing in-house design or subcontracting that design to others, this policy is going to cover you for that exposure. Now, under the Artisan product, as I said, the other product that we offer, this is for the specialty contractor. Again, mechanical, electrical, sprinkler, telecommunications, etc. Coverage is also linked to a wrongful act, but as you can see here, not only is this product going to provide coverage for the design services, but it also provides two other coverages that typically you're not going to see out in the marketplace. It provides faulty workmanship coverage and coverage for use of defective products or materials in the contractor's work. And so this is for the contractor self-performing. You're getting faulty workmanship coverage, and as I said, use of defective products or materials in your work. This is just continues the definition from the insuring agreement itself of what we're covering. So we're looking at property damage, loss of use, and once again, liability in the performance of design services. So in the case of design assist or delegated design services, the general contractor can purchase coverage to protect themselves under the professional liability form, and once again, that's going to provide coverage for their design services, whether it's in-house or subcontracted. In addition, they're working with the artisan contractors as well. It's quite prudent for them to make sure that these folks have coverage in place as well. And the great thing about the product that we offer here is that, once again, it's not only going to cover the artisan firms for their design services, but also their faulty workmanship. Obviously the general contractor has vicarious responsibility for these firms that he hires from, the specialty, the trades, if you will. So it's very important that they purchase the coverage that's going to respond to what they need on the project. These products can really provide a comfort level, that coverage is being provided for the professional exposures, and of course, in the case of the artisan, for the faulty workmanship as well.
Okay, yeah, and I think it's interesting that I think more and more contractors are understanding not only that they have either direct or vicarious liability, but are starting to realize that by requiring the errors and omissions policy on their especially subcontractors, they're really being protected in two ways, both from their subcontractors' liability, the performance design services, as well as for the loss of use or the impaired property that contractors will be contractually liable for. And this way, the subcontractors actually have coverage for that. I'm checking the questions, and we do have a few insurance questions already. So, one question is, can a general contractor or one of these artisans, especially subcontractors, buy the coverage on a project-by-project basis, or is this like professional liability where it's really a practice policy?
Coverage is not available on a per-project basis. A firm can buy what we have as the standard annual practice policy, if you will. So, if they purchase that, they will have that coverage in place and available to them for any, project that they take on during that period.
And here's another interesting question. I guess this person realizes that usually in the construction contracts, general contractors are passing on the cost of their insurance to the owner. And the question is, and many design firms would like to do that, but often don't have that same opportunity that contractors have. Do general contractors or subcontractors charge project owners for this kind of coverage?
Well, I would say that that's probably their business decision and whatnot. I have seen cases where I am providing the coverage and being told by the broker that, hey, the owner is paying for this coverage. So it does happen. Mm-hmm. And, there are also cases where, we may have a policy in place and a higher limit is being required for a project, and the cost of purchasing that higher limit is passed on to the owner, and the owner is willing to accept that and pay for it.
But there would be a situation where if the contractor is paying for the policy, that's fine during the performance of the work. But once the project is over, both the general contractor and the artisan subcontractor may have continuing professional liability or design liability for what they've provided to the owner. And if the owner is no longer paying for the coverage, they may not have the coverage anymore, right?
Correct.
So they may be really at risk on their own unless they're carrying the coverage and only charging the owner for the pro rata share of it or something like that.
Right, exactly.
If the general contractor does not have any licensed design professional on staff, who's in a position to sign and seal the documents for a delegated design part of the project. Can the general contractor still get coverage for its vicarious liability for the designs of subcontractors or outside?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that is one of the benefits of this product as well. It will cover the general contractor for his in-house exposure if he does have someone on staff, or his subcontract exposure if he's hiring someone. So either way, and of course, we're looking for them to have a licensed design professional that they're working with. That's obviously quite important.
And here's a question about the AIA documents. The question is, why don't the AIA documents require general contractors to have professional liability coverage? And I guess you could also say, or require general contractors to make sure their subcontractors have professional liability coverage. Actually, the AIA documents do that. In the 2017 AIA 8201 insurance requirements, it's a separate insurance exhibit on 8201 right now. It does require the general contractor to procure professional liability insurance coverage for its performance professional services. So if there is a delegated design to the contractor, then the insurance requirements of the 8201 kick in and require that contractor to purchase professional liability coverage. And if I remember correctly, the exhibit has a per claim and an aggregate limit that the parties can write in to see what that limit should be. And the A401, which is a standard subcontract, general contractor subcontractor agreement, has similar language in it, so that if professional services are required, the subcontractor needs to buy the coverage, and it's spelled out as to the limits and both per claim and aggregate limits, and it's also spelled out, I believe, to what period of time that coverage has to be. So in that case, a contractor could require a subcontractor to carry professional liability coverage for at least 5 years after completion of the project. So that would be part of the artisan contractors, specialty contractors overhead for that entire period, not only during construction but after construction. Kathy, you have any other comments on the insurance?
Well, I would encourage you to go to the SHNWR website, and if you have any questions, limits of liability that might be available, classes of artisan contractor that we can offer coverage for. There's a lot of information on the SHNWR website under the Design and Construction tab. My contact information is also there. If anyone would like to shoot me an email, has any further questions, I'd be happy to respond to.
Great, thank you. And let's do a little summary here. These points I think are important. Design delegation is a basic part of what's going on now. It blurs the line between design and construction. That's going to happen more and more. It's going to happen more not only because owners are demanding it, but because technology really ends up causing it. As you have more building information modeling and documents are going back and forth between parties, it really blurs the line between what's actual design, what's actual construction. So design delegation will be fostered by that, and the liability of general contractors and especially subcontractors will be increased because of that. The design assist, I think, will be increasingly used by clients who can promote early contractor involvement on the project. Part of it is that they really can create a kind of integrated project delivery without the financial impacts, and that's really the pain share, gain share of integrated project delivery, where the parties are really putting their profits at risk and sometimes their fees at risk over the course of the project. So you can get the same kind of integrated project delivery involvement of the parties without having them risk their assets on the project. And part of that really can lead to what more contractors are interested in, and that's lean construction. And lean construction incorporates a number of things, including more efficiencies on a project site, but it also means more efficiencies in getting the information in a timely manner, fewer RFIs, fewer change orders, and other things that hold up projects and cause a change in contract time and project and contract price. Many contractors realize that if they can finish projects on time and on budget, they can move on to other projects, and they're not really in the business to really go after change orders or extend their time. And I think we're seeing more and more contractors expanding their services throughout from every step of the way, from working with clients up front, even before the design process, to operating projects for clients. So we're seeing more and more contractors become really program managers or program administrators. Many of them started purchasing in-house expertise during the recession, where they were buying up people who understood BIM, were buying up the design professionals who could provide services in-house. Others are contracting out more and more to design firms. So the design firms are really a subcontractor to the construction contractor, almost like a design-build situation. And more contractors understand that they have the risk, and they're trying to properly insure their risk for their design liability. So I think that's what we'll be seeing in the future, and I hope this was helpful to you in really understanding design delegation and design assets. And I thank you, Kathy, for your assistance.